Why you take everything personally? Someone ignores your text for 2 hours, and suddenly your mind is writing a whole story. They're upset with me. I said something wrong. They don't care anymore. A small comment feels like criticism. A different tone feels like rejection. A simple okay feels cold. Taking everything personally ain't about being dramatic. It's usually about carrying invisible emotional weight that turns ordinary moments into emotional threats. You confuse other people's reactions with your worthy. One of the biggest reasons people take everything personally is because they confuse other people's reactions with their own worth. Someone's tone changes, and suddenly it feels like proof that you are annoying. Someone becomes distant, and your mind instantly translates it into rejection. A little criticism feels like confirmation that you are not good enough. Over time, you stop seeing reactions as temporary human emotions and start seeing them as measurements of your value. The truth is, most people are reacting from their own internal world. Their stress, exhaustion, insecurities, disappointments, and unresolved emotions shape how they speak and behave. Someone can be short with you because they are overwhelmed. Someone can seem cold because they are struggling privately. Someone can disagree with you without thinking you are worthless. But when your self-worth is fragile, every interaction starts feeling deeply personal. This usually develops when approval becomes emotionally tied to safety. Maybe you grew up feeling like love had to be earned through perfection, people-pleasing, or avoiding mistakes. Maybe criticism was harsh, affection was inconsistent, or validation was rare. As a result, your brain learned to monitor people's reactions closely because acceptance felt connected to survival. You became emotionally dependent on external reassurance. The problem with living this way is that your confidence becomes unstable. Good reactions make you feel valuable, while negative reactions make you feel inadequate. Your emotional state rises and falls based on how others respond to you. Compliments become emotional fuel, and criticism becomes emotional collapse. Instead of having an internal sense of worth, you hand that responsibility to everyone around you. But other people are unreliable mirrors. Their reactions are influenced by moods, personal struggles, biases, communication styles, and experiences that often have nothing to do with you. If you build your identity around those reactions, you will constantly feel anxious, insecure, and emotionally exhausted. Learning to separate your worth from people's behavior is one of the healthiest emotional shifts you can make. It means understanding that someone's bad mood does not define your value. Disagreement does not erase your intelligence. Rejection does not erase your importance. Criticism does not erase your growth. Other people can misunderstand you, dislike you, or fail to appreciate you without changing who you are. This does not mean ignoring feedback or pretending emotions do not matter. It means no longer allowing every external reaction to become a personal verdict on your identity. Healthy self-worth comes from knowing who you are without needing constant confirmation from others. The moment you stop treating every reaction as a reflection of your value, you begin to feel emotionally freer. You stop shrinking yourself to gain approval. You stop overanalyzing every interaction, and you finally realize that your worth was never supposed to be controlled by other people's opinions in the first place. You grew up reading emotional danger everywhere. Sometimes the reason you take everything personally has nothing to do with weakness or oversensitivity. It comes from growing up in environments where emotional danger felt real and unpredictable. When you spend years around criticism, anger, emotional inconsistency, rejection, or tension, your brain adapts by becoming hyper-aware. You learn to read people carefully because your emotional safety depends on it. As a child, you may have learned to notice the smallest shifts in tone, facial expressions, silence, or body language. A slammed door, a sigh, or a certain look could signal conflict, disappointment, or emotional withdrawal. Over time, your nervous system became trained to stay alert at all times. You learned to scan rooms emotionally before you even realized you were doing it. This survival response does not simply disappear when you grow older. The environment may change, but your mind still reacts as if emotional danger is everywhere. That is why neutral situations can suddenly feel threatening. A short text message feels cold. Constructive feedback feels like rejection. Someone needing space feels like abandonment. Your brain is not responding only to the present moment, it is responding to old emotional patterns it once had to survive. People who grew up this way often become extremely sensitive to emotional shifts in others. They overanalyze conversations, replay interactions in their heads, and search for hidden meanings behind small behaviors. They assume tension even when none exists, because their nervous system was trained to expect it. What others see as harmless, they experience as emotionally loaded. This can become exhausting because it creates a constant state of emotional vigilance. You start preparing for rejection before it happens. You apologize excessively, avoid conflict, people please, or become anxious over small misunderstandings. Relationships stop feeling safe because part of you is always waiting for emotional pain to appear. The difficult part is that these patterns once served a purpose. Hyperawareness may have protected you in an unstable environment. Being emotionally cautious may have helped you avoid criticism, conflict, or disappointment, but survival strategies that once kept you safe can later become obstacles to peace and connection. Healing begins when you realize that not every environment requires survival mode. Not every silence is anger. Not every disagreement is rejection. Not every change in someone's mood is your responsibility to fix. Learning this takes time because your nervous system may react before your logical mind can intervene. But awareness is the first step toward change. You can begin by slowing down your interpretations. Instead of immediately assuming the worst, ask yourself what facts actually exist. Separate present reality from past conditioning. Notice when your mind is treating ordinary interactions like emotional emergencies. Over time, this helps retrain your nervous system to recognize safety again. You are not weak for reacting strongly to emotional shifts. You simply learned to survive in a way that made you highly alert to danger, but you no longer have to live as though every interaction is a threat. Peace begins when you stop carrying old emotional alarms into every new relationship and situation. You seek validation to feel secure. One of the deepest reasons people take things personally is because they seek validation to feel emotionally secure. When your sense of worth depends heavily on how others see you, every reaction starts carrying emotional weight. A compliment can make your entire day feel lighter, while a small criticism can leave you questioning yourself for hours. Approval feels comforting because it temporarily quiets insecurity. Disapproval feels painful because it threatens the fragile sense of value you are trying to protect. Validation itself is not unhealthy. Everyone wants to feel appreciated, respected, and accepted. The problem begins when external approval becomes the main source of emotional stability. Instead of believing in your worth internally, you start depending on other people to confirm it for you. Their attention becomes reassurance. Their praise becomes proof. Their acceptance becomes emotional safety. This creates a dangerous emotional cycle because other people are inconsistent. Some days they are warm and encouraging, other days they are distracted, stressed, distant, or emotionally unavailable. If your confidence depends on their reactions, your self-worth will constantly rise and fall based on circumstances you cannot control. Many people develop this pattern early in life. Perhaps love felt conditional growing up. Maybe you were praised mainly for achievements, obedience, appearance, or making others happy. You may have learned that approval had to be earned rather than naturally deserved. As a result, validation became emotionally tied to safety, belonging, and worthiness. Over time, this can lead to people-pleasing behaviors. You avoid disagreement because criticism feels unbearable. You overthink conversations because you fear being disliked. You constantly seek reassurance because silence feels unsettling. You become highly sensitive to rejection because your identity feels connected to how others respond to you. Social media often intensifies this pattern. Likes, views, comments, and attention can create temporary feelings of importance, but they rarely produce lasting self-worth. The more you rely on external validation, the more emotionally dependent you become on constant reassurance, and no amount of approval is ever enough when insecurity exists underneath it. The difficult truth is that validation can comfort insecurity, but it cannot heal it. Even if everyone approves of you, inner insecurity will still search for reasons to feel uncertain. Lasting confidence comes from learning to value yourself without needing constant confirmation from others. This means developing an internal sense of worth that is not destroyed by criticism or inflated by praise. It means recognizing that disagreement does not make you unworthy. Rejection does not erase your value. Someone failing to appreciate you does not reduce your importance as a person. When you stop depending on validation for emotional security, relationships begin to feel healthier. You no longer perform for acceptance or panic over disapproval. You can hear feedback without collapsing emotionally. You can exist without constantly needing reassurance that you are enough. True confidence is not believing everyone will approve of you. It is knowing your worth remains intact even when they do not. You assume everything is about you. One reason people take things personally is because they unconsciously assume everything is about them. A friend becomes quiet, and they immediately wonder what they did wrong. Someone seems distant, and they assume they are being rejected. A coworker looks irritated, and they think they must be the cause. Without realizing it, they interpret other people's emotions and behaviors through a deeply personal lens. This is not always arrogance or self-importance. In many cases, it comes from anxiety, insecurity, or emotional hyperawareness. The mind becomes so focused on protecting itself from rejection or criticism that it starts making everything feel personally connected. Instead of seeing situations objectively, the brain automatically searches for how it might relate to you. The problem is that most people are not thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. People are usually consumed by their own stress, insecurities, responsibilities, disappointments, and emotional struggles. Someone may be distracted because of financial pressure, family issues, exhaustion, or internal battles you know nothing about. Their behavior may have very little to do with you. But when you personalize everything, your mind creates stories that make you the center of every situation. This pattern can become emotionally exhausting. You begin overanalyzing every conversation, facial expression, text message, or shift in tone. You replay interactions repeatedly, searching for hidden meanings. You assume there must be something wrong with you whenever someone behaves differently. Over time, this creates constant anxiety because your emotional state becomes tied to interpreting other people's moods. Often, this habit develops from a fear of rejection or a strong need for control. If you can identify what people feel about you, maybe you can avoid criticism, conflict, or abandonment. Your brain tries to protect you by staying hyper-aware of social signals. But instead of creating safety, it creates emotional tension because you are constantly assuming responsibility for things that may not belong to you. The truth is, not every silence is about you. Not every mood is connected to you. Not every change in behavior is a reflection of your worth. People are complex, emotional, distracted, and imperfect. They carry entire internal worlds that exist independently of you. Learning to stop personalizing everything requires challenging your automatic assumptions. Instead of immediately asking, "What did I do wrong?" try asking, "What else could be true?" Give people space to have emotions and experiences that are not centered around you. Remind yourself that human behavior is influenced by countless factors beyond your control. This does not mean ignoring genuine problems or refusing accountability when necessary. Sometimes people are upset with you, and healthy relationships require honest communication. But there is a difference between taking responsibility, when appropriate, and assuming responsibility for every emotional shift around you. Freedom begins when you stop making yourself the explanation for everything. You realize that other people's moods are not always your burden to carry. You stop exhausting yourself trying to decode every interaction. And slowly, you begin to experience relationships with less fear, less overthinking, and far more emotional peace. You fear rejection more than you realize. At the core of taking things personally is often a fear that runs deeper than most people realize. The fear of rejection. It is not always obvious because rejection does not only mean someone openly abandoning or dismissing you. Sometimes it appears in smaller, quieter forms, being ignored, misunderstood, criticized, excluded, or emotionally disconnected. When this fear exists beneath the surface, even ordinary interactions can begin to feel emotionally threatening. A delayed text message suddenly feels personal. A change in someone's tone feels like disapproval. Constructive feedback feels humiliating. A disagreement feels like the relationship itself is in danger. Your mind reacts strongly because it interprets these moments not as temporary experiences, but as signs that you are unwanted, unimportant, or not enough. People who fear rejection often become highly sensitive to emotional shifts in others. They overanalyze conversations, replay situations repeatedly, and search for hidden meanings behind small behaviors. They may constantly seek reassurance, avoid conflict, or work hard to keep everyone happy because they believe acceptance must be protected at all costs. Deep down, they fear that one mistake, one flaw, or one moment of disappointment could cause people to leave. This fear usually develops from painful emotional experiences. Perhaps you experienced criticism, abandonment, bullying, emotional neglect, or inconsistent affection growing up. Maybe love felt conditional, or connection felt unstable. Over time, your brain learned to associate rejection with emotional pain so strongly that it began trying to prevent it before it could happen again. The problem is that when you fear rejection intensely, you start seeing it everywhere, even where it may not exist. Neutral situations begin feeling loaded with meaning. Someone needing space feels like abandonment. A short response feels like anger. Honest feedback feels like proof of failure. Your nervous system becomes overly protective, constantly scanning for signs that you are no longer accepted. This can make relationships emotionally exhausting. Instead of feeling secure, you remain anxious about losing connection. You may shrink yourself to avoid upsetting others, struggle to express your real feelings, or become overly dependent on reassurance. Ironically, the stronger the fear of rejection becomes, the harder it can be to feel emotionally safe with people. The truth is, rejection is a normal part of life. Not everyone will understand you, agree with you, choose you, or stay connected to you forever. But rejection does not define your worth as a human being. Someone pulling away does not erase your value. Someone disagreeing with you does not make you unlovable. Someone failing to appreciate you does not mean you are insignificant. Healing begins when you stop treating rejection like proof that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It means understanding that discomfort, disagreement, and even loss are part of human relationships, not evidence of personal failure. The goal is not to avoid rejection completely. That is impossible. The goal is to build a sense of self strong enough that rejection no longer destroys your identity. When you stop fearing rejection as deeply, you stop taking every interaction so personally. You become more emotionally grounded, more authentic, and less controlled by the opinions and reactions of others. And that is where real emotional freedom begins. You haven't separated feelings from facts. One of the biggest reasons people take things personally is because they have not learned to separate feelings from facts. Emotions are powerful, immediate, and deeply convincing. When you feel ignored, rejected, criticized, or unwanted, those emotions can seem like undeniable proof that something is wrong. But feelings are emotional experiences, not always accurate interpretations of reality. This is where many people become trapped. They assume that because something feels true, it must automatically be true. If they feel rejected, they conclude they are unwanted. If they feel criticized, they assume they are failing. If they feel insecure, they believe they are inadequate. The emotion quickly becomes the evidence. But feelings are influenced by many things: past experiences, fears, insecurities, stress, exhaustion, trauma, and assumptions. Two people can experience the exact same situation and interpret it completely differently because their emotional filters are different. One person may see a delayed text response as normal, while another sees it as abandonment. The situation is the same, but the emotional interpretation changes the meaning. When you struggle to separate feelings from facts, your mind begins creating stories around emotions instead of reality. A short response becomes they are upset with me. A disagreement becomes they do not respect me. Someone needing space becomes I am being rejected. Over time, these emotional assumptions can damage relationships, increase anxiety, and create constant overthinking. The difficult part is that emotions feel extremely real in the moment. Your body reacts before logic has time to catch up. your heart races, your mind spirals, and suddenly the emotional interpretation feels certain. But certainty does not always equal truth. Just because your mind creates a painful story does not mean reality supports it. Learning to separate feelings from fact requires slowing down your reactions. Instead of immediately believing every emotional conclusion, you begin asking yourself important questions. Asterisk, what actually happened? Asterisk, what facts do I truly know? Asterisk, what assumptions am I adding? Asterisk, is there another possible explanation? For example, the fact may be that someone has not replied to your message for several hours. The feeling may be anxiety or rejection, but the story your mind creates, they are ignoring me because I am unimportant, is an interpretation, not a confirmed fact. This does not mean your feelings are invalid. Emotions matter because they reveal what you are experiencing internally. They deserve attention, compassion, and understanding. But emotions should inform your thinking, not completely control it. Healthy emotional awareness means recognizing the difference between what you feel and what is objectively true. The more you practice separating feelings from facts, the less emotionally reactive you become. You stop assuming the worst so quickly. You become calmer in relationships. You stop turning every uncomfortable emotion into a personal crisis. Most importantly, you begin responding to reality instead of reacting to fear-driven interpretations. Emotional maturity is not the absence of feelings. It is the ability to feel deeply without allowing emotions to distort reality. Once you learn that difference, you stop taking every experience so personally and start seeing situations with far more clarity, balance, and peace. Taking everything personally is more than a habit. It is often a survival pattern built from insecurity, fear, emotional conditioning, and the need for acceptance. When you confuse other people's reactions with your worth, seek validation to feel secure, fear rejection deeply, or assume every emotional shift is about you, ordinary interactions start feeling emotionally overwhelming. Your mind turns small moments into personal judgments, and over time, that becomes exhausting. But healing begins when you realize that not every feeling reflects reality and not every reaction defines your value. People's moods, behaviors, and opinions are shaped by their own experiences, struggles, and emotions, not just by you. Learning to separate your identity from external reactions allows you to move through life with far less anxiety and self-doubt. The goal is not to stop caring completely or become emotionally detached. The goal is to stop giving every comment, silence, disagreement, or rejection the power to determine how you see yourself. Real confidence comes from building an inner sense of worth that remains steady, even when others misunderstand you, criticize you, or fail to validate you. The more emotionally secure you become within yourself, the less personally you take the world around you. You stop overanalyzing every interaction. You stop assuming the worst. You stop carrying the emotional weight of things that were never meant to define you. And in that freedom, you finally begin to experience relationships, conversations, and life itself with more peace, clarity, and emotional balance.